Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey back in time, way back, to the dusty, marbled, and often shockingly violent world of the Roman emperors. Imagine you're there, toga gently rustling in the Mediterranean breeze, the scent of olive oil, and something vaguely unwashed hanging in the air. You hear the distant roar of the Colosseum, or maybe it's just your neighbor's cat having an existential crisis. You see grand aqueducts stretching across the landscape, monuments to engineering and unchecked ambition. But beneath all that imperial splendor, a dark current flows. It's a tale of power, paranoia, and just how disturbing life at the top could truly be. You probably won't survive this, not with the poisons, the backstabbing, and the sheer unpredictability of it all. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in 27 BCE. The Roman Republic, for all its grand ideals, is effectively dead. Oh, sure, the Senate still meets, senators still drone on, but the real power? It's coalescing around one man, Octavian. Remember him? The adopted son of Julius Caesar, the one who navigated the brutal civil wars that followed his adoptive father's assassination. He's not just a politician, he's a survivor, a master manipulator, and a PR genius. He understood something fundamental about Rome. The people were tired of endless conflict. They craved stability, even if it meant sacrificing a little liberty. Octavian, ever the astute player, didn't just seize power with a triumphant march and declare himself king. Oh no, that would have been far too vulgar, far too Republican-era blunt. Instead, he orchestrates a masterful charade. He restores the Republic. He gives back his emergency powers to the Senate. And what do the grateful senators do? Why, they practically beg him to stay. They bestow upon him the title of Augustus, meaning the revered one. It's a brilliant move, cloaking absolute power in the respectable guise of tradition. He became princeps, the first citizen, rather than an overt monarch. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine attempt at shared governance that simply failed, or a deliberate, subtle power grab from the very beginning. You watch as he meticulously dismantles the old Republican structures, not with a sledgehammer, but with a velvet glove. He controls the legions, the military might of Rome, ensuring their loyalty through land grants and pay. He consolidates key political offices, holding multiple important positions simultaneously. He even takes charge of the grain supply, a brilliant move that ensures the loyalty of the common people. No one wants to starve, after all. It's like he's playing a giant, real-life game of Civ 6, optimizing every single aspect of his empire for maximum stability and personal control. He even instituted a fire brigade in Rome, which, while practical, also gave him another subtle lever of control over the sprawling city. Imagine, if you will, the first Roman fire chief also being the most powerful man in the known world. Talk about a perk. This era, the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, is often lauded as a golden age, and in many ways, it was. Roads were built, trade flourished, and for a couple of centuries, the vast empire experienced relative calm. But remember, this peace was built on the foundation of one man's absolute authority. You, as a Roman citizen, might enjoy the stability, but you also learn quickly that dissent isn't tolerated. Augustus, despite his calm demeanor and cultivated image of moderation, could be ruthless when necessary. His early years were marked by proscriptions, lists of enemies to be eliminated. You'd wake up some mornings, wander down to the forum for your daily bread, and find new names tacked up, friends, neighbors, sometimes even family, suddenly declared enemies of the state. It's a chilling reminder that even under the revered one, life could be disturbingly precarious. He lived a long life for a Roman emperor, dying in his bed at 76, a rare feat in this line of work. He even managed to secure a successor, his stepson Tiberius, after a complicated series of adoptions and premature deaths. It's almost as if he anticipated the show needed a sequel. You can almost hear him saying, "And now, for my next trick, I shall invent the hereditary monarchy, sort of." The stage is set for the emperors to come, a stage where absolute power will breed both incredible achievements and unimaginable horrors. You can feel the weight of this new system, the immense pressure on the man at the top, knowing that the wrong decision, the wrong word, could unravel everything. So, Augustus, the grand architect of this new imperial system, finally shuffles off this mortal coil, and you, standing there in the bustling Roman Forum, watch as his successor steps into the immense void he left behind. This isn't some dashing, charismatic figure, no. This is Tiberius, Augustus's stepson, a man already in his 50s, known more for his military prowess and a somewhat surly disposition than for any particular warmth or charm. You probably wouldn't invite him to your toga party, unless you needed someone to glare disapprovingly at the punch. Tiberius was, by all accounts, a reluctant emperor. He didn't crave the spotlight. In fact, he seemed to actively despise it. Imagine inheriting the biggest, most powerful company in the world, a company built by a meticulous perfectionist, and all you really want to do is retire to a quiet island with your books. That's Tiberius. He was an excellent general, a capable administrator, but the constant political maneuvering, the sycophancy of the Senate, and the sheer weight of public expectations seemed to gnaw at him. His reign starts with a period of grudging competence. He maintains the peace, keeps the legions in line, and even manages the empire's finances relatively well. But you sense a simmering resentment beneath the surface. He trusts almost no one, a trait honed by years of being sidelined by Augustus, only to be thrust into the role of heir after a succession of family tragedies. He truly believes the Senate is out to get him, which, to be fair, they often were. This paranoia grows, slowly but surely, like a particularly persistent Roman cough. Then, around 26 CE, after years of this increasingly stifling atmosphere, Tiberius makes a dramatic decision. He packs his bags and sails off to the island of Capri, a stunning, sun-drenched rock in the Bay of Naples. You can picture it. Crystal clear waters, lush vegetation, and hidden grottos. Sounds idyllic, right? For Tiberius, it became his personal fortress, his escape from the suffocating pressures of Rome. From Capri, he continued to govern the empire, communicating through dispatches and couriers. It's as if he decided to remote work as emperor long before video calls were invented. Historians still argue whether his retreat to Capri was primarily a strategic move to escape the political intrigue of Rome, or simply a manifestation of his deeply introverted and misanthropic personality. But life on Capri wasn't all tranquil contemplation and sea breezes. The distance from Rome seemed to amplify his paranoia. He relied increasingly on a single, ambitious figure, Sejanus, the prefect of the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's personal bodyguard. Sejanus, with Tiberius isolated on Capri, began to consolidate immense power in Rome, eliminating rivals, real and perceived, and even, it is suspected, charming his way into the imperial family's inner circle. You hear whispers of purges, of treason trials, of people disappearing. The news that trickles down from the capital is chilling. Tiberius, meanwhile, is said to have indulged in increasingly bizarre and cruel activities on Capri. The stories that circulated, whispered from slave to senator, are sensational. Tales of sexual depravity, of torturing victims by throwing them off cliffs, of bizarre spectacles designed for his private amusement. Now, it's important to remember that these accounts come largely from later Roman historians who were often hostile to Tiberius, so you have to take them with a pinch of salt, or perhaps a whole jar. Still, the sheer volume and consistency of these rumors paint a picture of a man who, freed from the constraints of public scrutiny, let his darker impulses run wild. It's like your grumpy uncle, given absolute power, deciding to create his own personal, disturbing theme park. Eventually, even Tiberius, in his remote island paradise, realizes that Sejanus has become too powerful, too dangerous. The wheels of imperial justice, slow as they sometimes were, began to turn. Sejanus is suddenly, brutally arrested and executed, along with his entire family and network of supporters. You can almost feel the collective sigh of relief in Rome, followed quickly by renewed fear as the emperor's purges continued, even more intensely, fueled by a newly reawakened, vindictive paranoia. Tiberius finally died in 37 CE, still on Capri, still brooding, still distrustful. His end was as murky as much of his reign. Some accounts claim he died naturally. Others suggest he was smothered by his own officials when he seemed to recover from a collapse. Either way, his death opened the door for the next act in this disturbing drama. You, a mere citizen, might have breathed a sigh of relief, but a chill lingers. The precedent had been set. An emperor could isolate himself, rule through fear, and indulge in private vices, leaving a trail of broken lives in his wake. With Tiberius finally out of the picture, leaving behind a legacy of paranoia and isolation, you, along with the rest of Rome, hold your breath. Who will step into the imperial sandals next? The answer comes in the form of Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, better known by his childhood nickname, Caligula, meaning little boot, a fond nod to the miniature military boots he wore as a child while campaigning with his father, Germanicus. He's the great-grandson of Augustus, and crucially, the beloved son of a revered general. For a brief, shining moment, the city breathes a collective sigh of relief. Caligula starts his reign with a flourish of popularity. He opens up the imperial accounts, which Tiberius had kept famously tight, throws lavish games, and abolishes a hated sales tax. It's a breath of fresh air after the oppressive gloom of the previous emperor. You see the joy in the streets, the hope in people's eyes. It's like a beloved rock star taking the stage after a particularly dour opening act. For the first few months, everything seems bright, promising a return to the glory days of Augustus. But then, something shifts. Perhaps it's the immense power, perhaps it's an illness. Some historians suggest he suffered from a severe fever early in his reign that may have damaged his brain. But Caligula's personality undergoes a dramatic and disturbing transformation. The benevolent young ruler quickly descends into tyranny, cruelty, and grotesque self-indulgence. You start to hear the whispers, at first dismissed as gossip, then growing louder, more insistent, and far more terrifying. He begins to demand worship, not just as emperor, but as a living god. Temples are erected to him. Sacrifices are made in his name. He often appeared in divine costumes, sometimes as Jupiter, sometimes as Mercury, demanding adoration. It's one thing to respect the emperor. It's quite another to prostrate yourself before him, as if he were literally a deity. You, a pragmatic Roman, find this deeply unsettling. It smacks of Eastern despotism, not Roman tradition. The stories of his bizarre excesses become legendary, blurring the lines between fact and malicious rumor. He supposedly planned to make his favorite horse, Incitatus, a consul. Imagine, if you will, the senatorial debates, all in favor of the oat rationing bill, nay. While it's unlikely Incitatus ever actually held office, Caligula certainly gave the horse a marble stable, an ivory manger, and an entourage of servants. It was a calculated insult to the Roman Senate, a clear message that he held them in utter contempt. His cruelty knew few bounds. He enjoyed watching tortures and executions, often presiding over them himself. He forced senators to run for miles ahead of his chariot. He delighted in public humiliation. You hear chilling tales of guests at banquets suddenly being marked for death, or of people being invited to his palace only to be summarily executed for his amusement. It's a terrifying reversal of fortune, where yesterday's favorite could be tomorrow's victim. The concept of gravitas, that deep-seated Roman seriousness and dignity, seemed to evaporate in his presence, replaced by a disturbing capriciousness. His private life was equally scandalous. Rumors abounded of incestuous relationships with his sisters, and his promiscuity was legendary. He squandered the imperial treasury on lavish building projects and extravagant games, draining the coffers that Tiberius had so carefully accumulated. It's as if he decided to throw the wildest, most expensive party Rome had ever seen, without a care for the bill or the consequences. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect was the sheer unpredictability of his moods. One moment, he could be charming and witty. The next, he could order your execution for a minor perceived slight. You lived in constant fear, never knowing if a joke would land you in favor or land your head on a spike. It's the ultimate chaotic work environment, where job security is measured in minutes, not years. Historians still argue whether Caligula was genuinely insane, or if his actions were a deliberate, albeit extreme, strategy to consolidate absolute power by instilling terror. This reign of terror couldn't last. The Praetorian Guard, the very men sworn to protect him, grew tired of his increasingly erratic and dangerous behavior. They feared for their own lives, knowing that no one was safe. In January of 41 CE, a conspiracy within the Guard led to his assassination. You'd hear the shouts and commotion from the palace, the sudden silence, and then the triumphant, if slightly terrified, cries of his killers. Rome, for a moment, held its breath again, wondering if the Republic would be restored or if another emperor would simply take the stage. Little did they know, the next emperor was literally hiding behind a curtain. As the echoes of Caligula's assassination fade from the palace halls, a frantic search begins. The Praetorian Guard, having just rid Rome of one madman, are now faced with a very practical problem. Who's next? You, a curious citizen, might peek around the corner, expecting a grand senatorial debate, but instead, you hear a frantic scuffle. Lo and behold, the soldiers find a terrified, stammering man literally hiding behind a curtain, shaking in fear. This isn't some hardened general or cunning politician. This is Tiberius Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, more commonly known as Claudius. Claudius was Caligula's uncle, a man long dismissed by his family as sickly, clumsy, and academically inclined. Basically, the uncool relative nobody expected to amount to much. He had a limp, a stammer, and suffered from various ailments, which, ironically, probably saved his life during the various purges of Tiberius and Caligula. No one saw him as a threat, so no one bothered to eliminate him. He spent his life largely ignored, poring over books, writing histories, and generally living in his own scholarly world. Imagine the quiet, nerdy guy in your office suddenly being crowned CEO. That's Claudius. The Praetorian Guard, in a moment of utter pragmatism and perhaps a desire to secure their own positions, hailed him as emperor. It was a chaotic, almost accidental ascension. You can almost hear the guardsmen saying, "Well, he's available, and he probably won't try to make his horse consul." Claudius, utterly bewildered, was practically dragged to the throne. He was the first emperor truly chosen by the military, a dangerous precedent that would echo through centuries of Roman history. Historians still argue whether Claudius was genuinely surprised by his elevation, or if his timid facade masked a shrewd understanding of his precarious position and how to survive it. Despite his unassuming appearance and physical infirmities, Claudius proved to be a surprisingly effective ruler. He was intelligent, diligent, and possessed a keen administrative mind. He wasn't a showman like Augustus, nor a paranoid recluse like Tiberius, nor a madman like Caligula. He was, fundamentally, a bureaucrat. And for Rome, after the chaos of Caligula, a good bureaucrat was exactly what was needed. He established efficient government departments, appointing skilled freedmen, former slaves, to key positions, much to the annoyance of the traditional Roman nobility. You could almost hear the senators grumbling about how these upstarts were running the empire. One of his most significant achievements, and a testament to his ambition, was the conquest of Britain. You can imagine the murmurs and excitement as news spread through the city, Roman legions landing on that misty, far-off island. It wasn't an easy campaign, but it cemented his military credentials and expanded the empire significantly. Claudius even went to Britain himself for a short time, though probably not for the rugged camping experience. It was more for the triumphant parade upon his return, a grand spectacle designed to bolster his legitimacy. Claudius also undertook massive public works projects. He completed Caligula's aqueducts. Something had to be done about the water supply, after all, built new roads, and, most importantly, constructed a new harbor at Ostia, Rome's port city. This new harbor was vital for ensuring a steady supply of grain to the vast population of Rome, preventing the kind of food shortages that could spark riots. You, as a city dweller, definitely appreciate the reliable bread supply. However, Claudius's reign wasn't without its disturbing elements. His personal life was notoriously tumultuous, dominated by powerful and ambitious wives. His third wife, Messalina, was infamous for her promiscuity and ruthless political machinations. You'd hear the scandalous gossip, whispered in the baths and taverns, about her insatiable appetites and how she plotted against anyone who stood in her way. She was eventually executed for daring to publicly marry another man while Claudius was still alive, a step too far even for him. His fourth wife and niece, Agrippina the Younger, was even more cunning and ambitious. She was determined to secure the succession for her son, Nero, over Claudius's own biological son, Britannicus. You watch as she systematically maneuvers to consolidate her power, pushing her son forward and eliminating potential rivals. It's a masterclass in ancient political maneuvering, and Claudius, despite his intelligence, seemed blind or unwilling to resist her influence. Ultimately, Claudius died in 54 CE. The official cause was illness, but you can't help but hear the strong rumors of poison, specifically poison mushrooms, administered by Agrippina. It would certainly fit her modus operandi. So, the stuttering scholar who stumbled into the emperorship leaves behind a more stable, expanded empire, but also a legacy of powerful, dangerous women and a rather unsettling example of how easily a seemingly harmless individual could be manipulated for political gain. The stage is now set for Agrippina's ambitious young son, a youth with artistic leanings and a disturbingly casual approach to power. So, Claudius, the unlikely scholar emperor, is gone, presumably via a particularly potent batch of mushrooms. And now, you watch as his 16-year-old stepson, Nero, steps into the imperial spotlight. Agrippina the Younger, his fiercely ambitious mother, practically shoves him onto the throne, having meticulously cleared the path by eliminating rivals and, likely, Claudius himself. For the first few years, Rome breathes a cautious sigh of relief. Agrippina, along with Nero's tutors, the philosopher Seneca and the Praetorian prefect Burrus, largely guide the young emperor, and things seem to be going okay. You might even think, perhaps this time, it will be different. Perhaps we'll get a sensible, well-governed reign. Oh, you sweet, naive Roman. Nero starts off with a flair for the dramatic, but initially, it's a good kind of dramatic. He's interested in the arts, poetry, music, acting, chariot racing. He even performed publicly, which was scandalous for an emperor. Actors were generally low status, but it endeared him to the common people. He built public gymnasiums and organized lavish spectacles. He was trying to be a different kind of emperor, one focused on culture and entertainment, rather than just military conquest and administration. You might enjoy the free shows and the general sense of lightness. It's like having a rock star CEO who occasionally puts on concerts instead of just board meetings. But the artistic temperament, combined with absolute power and a healthy dose of megalomania, quickly curdles. Nero chafes under the control of his mother and his advisors. The first disturbing sign? He has his own mother, Agrippina, murdered. Imagine the audacity. This wasn't some quiet poisoning. He tried to stage a shipwreck, and when that failed, he sent assassins. It's a chilling reminder that no family tie, no matter how sacred, could withstand the emperor's will. Historians still argue whether Nero's matricide was an act of pure evil or a desperate move to escape Agrippina's overbearing control, which had reportedly become unbearable. Then comes the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE. You remember the terrifying glow in the night sky, the frantic shouts, the sheer scale of the destruction. Much of the city, including your own neighborhood, perhaps, is engulfed in flames for days. The rumor spreads like wildfire, pun intended, that Nero himself started it, or at least fiddled while Rome burned. Now, it's highly unlikely he literally played a fiddle, they didn't have them back then, and he was probably in Antium anyway, but the image sticks. He used the devastated areas to build his extravagant new palace, the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a vast complex with artificial lakes and rotating dining rooms. It's a magnificent, albeit deeply insensitive, display of wealth amidst widespread devastation. To deflect suspicion for the fire, Nero needed a scapegoat. And who better than a mysterious, rapidly growing sect of people who seem to keep to themselves and reject traditional Roman gods? The Christians. This marks one of the first major persecutions of Christians by the Roman state. You hear the horrifying tales. Christians rounded up, tortured, executed in gruesome ways, some covered in animal skins and torn apart by dogs, others crucified, still others lit as human torches to illuminate Nero's garden parties. It's a dark stain on Roman history, a chilling example of state-sponsored terror against a minority group. Nero's artistic ambitions become more bizarre and self-indulgent. He forces senators and nobles to attend his long, tedious performances. Imagine trying to stay awake and clap enthusiastically for hours on end, knowing your life depends on it. He declares himself a champion chariot racer and gladiator, despite being completely unqualified and probably needing a hefty head start. It's like a perpetually spoiled child throwing a tantrum on the world stage, except the tantrums involve executions and ruin. He bankrupted the state with his lavish spending and forced many wealthy citizens to donate their fortunes to him. His increasingly tyrannical rule and unpredictable behavior eventually alienate everyone: the Senate, the Praetorian Guard, and even the legions in the provinces. Several rebellions break out. You hear the news of generals declaring themselves emperor, a familiar and terrifying pattern emerging. Finally, in 68 CE, facing a full-scale revolt and declared a public enemy by the Senate, Nero flees Rome. His death is as dramatic as his life. Cornered and unable to bring himself to commit suicide, he supposedly uttered the famous last words, "Qualis artifex perio," "What an artist dies in me," before forcing his secretary to stab him. You, the Roman citizen, might feel a momentary relief that the nightmare is over, but the aftershocks of Nero's reign, his instability, and his devastating abuse of power will plunge Rome into yet another period of bloody civil war. The question now isn't who will be emperor, but how many will try. The death of Nero, the artistic tyrant, leaves a vacuum at the heart of the Roman Empire, and you, standing amidst the lingering smoke of past atrocities, feel the tremors of instability ripple outwards. With no clear successor, the stage is set for a chaotic and brutal period known as the Year of the Four Emperors, 69 CE. It's a dizzying, bloody merry-go-round of power, where you barely learn one emperor's name before another contender is marching on Rome. Imagine a game of musical chairs, but the losers end up headless. The first to step forward is Galba, the elderly governor of Hispania. He's an old-school Roman, stern, uncharismatic, and known for his frugality. You might think, finally, some mature leadership. He marches on Rome, and the Praetorian Guard, ever opportunistic, abandons Nero and pledges allegiance to him. Galba enters Rome, but his reign is short-lived and unpopular. He alienates the very soldiers who brought him to power by refusing to pay them the promised donative, a sort of bonus payment. His attempts at fiscal austerity are commendable in theory, but politically disastrous in practice. He's also seen as somewhat out of touch, perhaps even a bit stingy. You hear the grumbling among the legions, a dangerous sound for any emperor. Within months, another contender emerges, Otho, a former companion of Nero and a man of much flashier tastes. He's charismatic, charming, and crucially, promises the Praetorian Guard the donative they were denied. The Guard, realizing their mistake with Galba, promptly assassinate the old emperor in the Forum, hacking him to pieces. You might have seen the grim spectacle, a stark reminder of how quickly fortunes could turn. Otho is proclaimed emperor. You barely have time to adjust your toga. But before Otho can even properly settle onto the imperial throne, news arrives of yet another challenger. Vitellius, the corpulent, gluttonous commander of the powerful legions in Germania, has been proclaimed emperor by his troops. His legions, veterans of fierce campaigns on the Rhine frontier, are formidable. This isn't just a squabble in Rome. This is a full-blown civil war, with legions loyal to different men marching against each other. You hear the stories of battles raging in Italy, Roman fighting Roman, a horrifying echo of the civil wars that birthed the empire itself. Otho, despite his initially popular start, proves to be less successful on the battlefield. His forces are decisively defeated by Vitellius's legions in northern Italy. Rather than prolong the bloodshed, Otho takes the surprisingly honorable step of committing suicide. He declares he would rather die than cause further destruction to Rome. It's a moment of rare, almost poignant, self-sacrifice amidst so much cynical ambition. His reign lasted a mere 3 months. So, Vitellius arrives in Rome, triumphantly. He's a man of simple pleasures, mostly food and drink, and while not inherently cruel, he's certainly not an inspiring leader. He brings with him the rough, undisciplined legions from the German frontier, who quickly make themselves at home in Rome, often engaging in brawling and looting. You see the streets become rougher, the atmosphere more tense. His short reign is marked by excesses and a general lack of seriousness. He spent fortunes on banquets and neglected the pressing affairs of the state. Historians still debate whether Vitellius's indulgent lifestyle was a sign of genuine incompetence or a calculated move to gain popularity among the soldiers and common populace who enjoyed the games and feasts. But the musical chairs aren't over. While Vitellius is feasting and enjoying himself in Rome, another, far more formidable contender emerges from the eastern provinces: Vespasian, a grizzled, no-nonsense general who is currently commanding the legions putting down a major revolt in Judea, the Jewish War. Vespasian is a man of humble origins, a practical soldier, and utterly disgusted by the antics of Vitellius. His legions, disciplined and battle-hardened, proclaim him emperor. You witness the final, brutal act of this chaotic year. Vespasian's forces, led by his general Primus, march on Rome. The fighting is fierce, house to house, with horrific casualties. The Capitol building, a sacred heart of Rome, is even set on fire during the struggle. It's a shocking display of the empire eating itself. Vitellius is eventually captured, dragged through the streets, tormented by the mob, and brutally murdered. His body is thrown into the Tiber River. The year of the four emperors finally comes to a close with Vespasian's triumph. You, the Roman citizen, are left utterly exhausted and deeply relieved. This year has shown the fragility of the imperial system without a clear line of succession and the immense power wielded by the legions. It's a grim lesson. The emperor might rule Rome, but the legions ruled the emperor. After the tumultuous year of the four emperors, Rome, and you along with it, collectively sigh with exhaustion and relief as Vespasian finally takes the reins. This isn't another pampered noble or artistic dilettante. Vespasian is a breath of fresh, pragmatic air. He's a seasoned military man, 59 years old, from a relatively humble equestrian family, not the ancient patrician stock. Imagine your gruff, no-nonsense uncle, but instead of fixing your leaky faucet, he's fixing an entire empire. Vespasian's main goal is simple: restore order and stability to Rome. The treasury is empty, drained by Nero's excesses and the civil wars. The legions are restless, and public confidence is at an all-time low. He approaches the task with the directness of a soldier. He's known for his wit, his earthy humor, and his legendary common sense. He's the kind of emperor who, when his son Titus complained about attacks on public latrines, famously held up a coin and said, "Pecunia non olet," money doesn't stink. A pragmatic approach, indeed, to public finance. His reign marks the beginning of the Flavian dynasty, the first imperial line not descended from Julius Caesar or Augustus. This is a deliberate break from the past, an affirmation that competence, not just bloodline, can lead to the throne. Vespasian immediately sets about restoring discipline in the army, a crucial step after the chaos of the civil wars. He also tackles the dire financial situation with a series of new taxes, which, while unpopular, are necessary to refill the coffers. You might grumble about the new latrine tax, but you also appreciate that your city isn't crumbling around you anymore. One of Vespasian's most enduring legacies, and a brilliant piece of public relations, is the construction of the Flavian Amphitheater, which you know today as the Colosseum. Imagine the spectacle. It's built on the site of Nero's extravagant Golden House Lake, a clear message that the days of imperial self-indulgence are over, replaced by public entertainment for the masses. You witness the long years of construction, the ingenious engineering that goes into it, and finally, its grand opening with lavish gladiatorial games. It's a marvel, a symbol of Rome's renewed strength and its commitment to keeping the populace entertained and, crucially, distracted. Historians still argue whether Vespasian's decision to build the Colosseum was primarily a political move to distance himself from Nero, or a genuine desire to provide public amenities and consolidate popular support. Vespasian rules for 10 years, providing a much-needed period of stability. He dies a natural death in 79 CE, a rare feat for a Roman emperor, allegedly quipping on his deathbed, "V. Puto Deus Fio. Oh dear, I think I'm becoming a god." His succession is smooth, as he had carefully prepared his eldest son, Titus, to take over. Titus, the conqueror of Jerusalem during the Jewish War, which you heard about back in Section 6, is well-liked and generally considered a benevolent ruler. His reign, however, is tragically short. He inherits not only the empire, but also a series of major disasters. In 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius erupts, burying Pompeii and Herculaneum under ash. You hear the horrifying news, the stories of towns instantly fossilized, a chilling reminder of nature's power. Then, a massive fire sweeps through Rome, followed by a devastating plague. Titus responds to these crises with generosity and compassion, personally overseeing relief efforts and using his own funds to help the victims. You see his popularity grow, a genuinely good man trying to grapple with immense misfortune. But within 2 years, Titus too dies, likely of natural causes, leaving the throne to his younger brother, Domitian. You, the Roman citizen, might feel a twinge of apprehension. Titus was beloved, but Domitian is known to be a very different character, more reserved, more authoritarian, and perhaps more suspicious. The Flavians, in their brief dynastic span, transformed Rome. They rebuilt the city, replenished the treasury, and perhaps most importantly, they re-established a sense of legitimate authority after the chaos of the Julio-Claudians and the Year of Four Emperors. You see Rome, battered but resilient, rising once more, its foundations strengthened by these pragmatic soldier emperors, even as the seeds of future tyranny are already being sown by the last of their line. So, after the tragically short but well-regarded reign of Titus, his younger brother, Domitian, takes the imperial stage in 81 CE, and you, having just seen Rome recover from a string of disasters under Titus, can't help but feel a subtle shift in the air. Domitian is not his charismatic, open brother. He's much more like Tiberius in his reserved nature and suspicion, but with an added layer of imperial arrogance. He's tall, handsome, and initially appears competent, but there's a certain chill in his demeanor. Domitian starts his reign with a focus on good governance and efficient administration. He's attentive to justice, ensures the provinces are well run, and strengthens Rome's finances. He even restores the capital, which had been damaged during the civil wars, and expands the Flavian Palace on the Palatine Hill, making it an even grander imperial residence. You appreciate the stability and the focus on rebuilding. It's like your stern but efficient boss who keeps the company running smoothly, even if he never cracks a smile. However, Domitian has a deeply autocratic streak. Unlike his father and brother, he disdains the pretense of republican traditions and openly embraces the idea of absolute monarchy. He insists on being addressed as Lord and God, Dominus et Deus, a title that immediately raises eyebrows among the senatorial class, who still clung to the illusion of their own importance. You find it jarring, this outright demand for divine reverence, a stark contrast to Augustus's subtle power plays. It's a very public declaration of his supreme authority, and it unnerves the traditionalists. His reign is marked by an increasing paranoia and a growing reliance on informers. He sees conspiracies everywhere, both real and imagined. Senators, members of the imperial court, even ordinary citizens, can suddenly find themselves accused of treason or impiety. The atmosphere becomes stifling, reminiscent of the darker days of Tiberius and Caligula. You learn to watch your words, to avoid discussing politics too openly, even in your own home. It's a chilling reminder of how quickly a ruler can turn from a benevolent administrator to a feared tyrant. Historians still argue whether Domitian's increasing paranoia was a result of genuine threats against him, or simply a deep-seated insecurity exacerbated by the immense power he wielded. He becomes particularly harsh on perceived religious nonconformists, including Jews and, again, the burgeoning Christian community. While not on the scale of Nero's persecutions, there are certainly instances of Christians being targeted for refusing to worship the emperor. You might hear whispers of people disappearing, of trials based on flimsy accusations. Domitian also has a peculiar fascination with architecture and monument building, and not always in a way that endeared him to the public. He was particularly fond of building large, impressive structures, many of which were dedicated to himself. He loved theatrical spectacles, building an Odeon, a small theater for musical performances, and a stadium for athletic contests, which you might enjoy, even if you know they're primarily there to glorify the emperor. He even made a point of personally supervising many of the gladiatorial games, taking a keen interest in the details, which was seen as somewhat undignified for an emperor. His military campaigns are mixed. He fought wars in Dacia, modern-day Romania, and along the Germanic frontier. While he secured some victories, he also made peace treaties that were sometimes perceived as dishonorable by the Roman elite, leading to quiet grumbling. He was more of an administrator of the army than a charismatic field commander. As the years pass, Domitian's grip tightens, and his suspicions deepen. Executions become more frequent, often based on trivial pretexts. The senatorial opposition, once a vocal if ultimately powerless force, is brutally suppressed. He conducts purges within his own household, eliminating those he no longer trusts. You feel the tension in the air, the constant dread that anyone could be next. It's like living under the gaze of a strict, unpredictable schoolmaster, except the punishments are far more severe than detention. Finally, like many tyrannical emperors before him, Domitian falls victim to a conspiracy within his own household, involving members of the Praetorian Guard and even his own wife. In September of 96 CE, he is assassinated. You hear the news, perhaps through cautious whispers, and feel a mixture of relief and trepidation. The Senate, which had suffered under his authoritarian rule, immediately condemns his memory, orchestrating a damnatio memoriae, a condemnation of memory, where his statues are pulled down and his name is erased from inscriptions. It's a symbolic act, meant to eradicate his legacy. But as you look around, you wonder, who will come next? And will this cycle of paranoia and assassination ever end? With Domitian's dramatic exit and the subsequent damnatio memoriae, Rome once again finds itself at a crossroads. The Senate, having just witnessed another emperor fall to assassination, makes a bold and unusual move. They don't wait for a general to declare himself emperor. Instead, they choose an elderly, respected senator named Nerva. This marks the beginning of an unprecedented period often called the Five Good Emperors, a phrase coined centuries later by the philosopher Machiavelli, who admired their stable, adoptive succession. You might feel a glimmer of hope, a sense that perhaps, just perhaps, Rome has learned from its disturbing past. Nerva is old, gentle, and utterly lacking in imperial ambition. He's chosen precisely because he's not a military strongman, and he's seen as a safe pair of hands after Domitian's tyranny. His reign, however, is short, lasting only 16 months. He struggles to control the Praetorian Guard, who still feel a loyalty to Domitian and even demand the execution of his assassins. You see Nerva, a man of peace, finding it difficult to assert his authority over the rough soldiers who put emperors on and took them off thrones. Realizing his precarious position, Nerva makes a truly momentous decision. He adopts Trajan, the highly respected and successful governor of Upper Germany, as his son and successor. This isn't adoption for lack of a biological heir. It's adoption of the most competent man available. It's a deliberate shift from hereditary succession to a merit-based system, a truly innovative approach to imperial power. You watch as Trajan, a Spaniard by birth, the first emperor from outside Italy, brings a new energy and military prestige to the throne. Trajan's reign, 98 to 117 CE, is often seen as the absolute pinnacle of the Roman Empire. He's a soldier's emperor, popular with the legions, but also a skilled administrator and a patron of public works. He's known for his fairness and his willingness to consult with the Senate, fostering an era of relative cooperation between the emperor and the senatorial class. You feel a genuine sense of optimism pervading the city. This is Rome at its most confident, its most expansive. Under Trajan, the empire reaches its greatest territorial extent. He conquers Dacia, a rich kingdom across the Danube, bringing vast amounts of gold into the Roman treasury. You hear the tales of his daring campaigns, the massive bridge he built across the Danube, a feat of engineering that still astounds, and the grand triumphal column erected in Rome to commemorate his victories, Trajan's Column, which still stands today, depicting his Dacian campaigns in an intricate spiral relief. It's an age of expansion, wealth, and undeniable Roman power. He even embarked on campaigns in Parthia, pushing Rome's influence further east than ever before. Historians still argue whether Trajan's aggressive expansionist policy was ultimately beneficial for the long-term stability of the empire, or if it stretched Rome's resources too thin. Trajan also undertakes massive building projects across the empire, improving infrastructure, building new forums, including his magnificent Forum of Trajan in Rome, and expanding Rome's port facilities. He institutes social welfare programs, including a system to provide financial support for poor children. You can sense the genuine prosperity and well-being spreading through the empire. It's a golden age, indeed, for many. When Trajan dies in 117 CE, he is succeeded by his adopted son, Hadrian. Hadrian, unlike Trajan, is more of a consolidator than an expander. He recognized that the empire might have grown too large to effectively defend. He makes the strategic decision to pull back from some of Trajan's furthest conquests, like Mesopotamia, and focus on securing existing borders. Hadrian, 117 to 138 CE, is known for his intellect, his love of Greek culture, and his passion for travel. He spent more than half his reign touring the vast empire, personally inspecting legions, building projects, and provincial administrations. You hear tales of the emperor himself visiting far-flung outposts, dressed like a general, mingling with the troops. His most famous legacy, of course, is Hadrian's Wall in Britain, a massive defensive barrier built to keep out the wild northern tribes. It's a physical manifestation of his policy of consolidation and defense. He's also responsible for rebuilding the Pantheon in Rome, that magnificent temple to all gods, with its awe-inspiring dome. Under Hadrian, Rome enjoys continued peace and prosperity. The adoptive system of succession ensures that competent, experienced men ascend to the throne, rather than potentially unstable or cruel biological heirs. This period offers a refreshing contrast to the disturbing reigns of previous emperors, showing that with careful planning and wise choices, even absolute power can be wielded for the common good. You, as a citizen, can sleep a little easier, knowing that the man on the throne is likely to be capable and just. The era of the 5 good emperors continues, and you, living in this period of relative stability and prosperity, might just start to believe that Rome has finally found its rhythm, a way to tame the wild beast of imperial power. After Hadrian, the adoptive succession continues with Antoninus Pius, 138 to 161 CE. He's the embodiment of his adopted name, pious, meaning dutiful or devout. He's a calm, even-tempered man, preferring to govern from Rome rather than embark on endless travels like Hadrian. Antoninus Pius's reign is remarkable for its sheer uneventfulness, which, in the context of Roman imperial history, is high praise indeed. He rules for over 2 decades, presiding over a period of profound peace and economic stability. There are no major wars, no dramatic conspiracies, no outlandish imperial whims. He reinforces existing laws, supports public education, and continues the social welfare programs initiated by Trajan. You appreciate the quiet competence, the sense that the empire is simply chugging along efficiently, without any sudden, terrifying lurches. He even built another wall in Britain, the Antonine Wall, though it would eventually be abandoned for Hadrian's. Historians still argue whether Antoninus Pius's uneventful reign was a testament to his exceptional leadership, or simply a period of calm before the storm, with underlying issues brewing beneath the surface. Antoninus Pius, like his predecessors, carefully selects his successor, adopting not one, but 2 young men, Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus. This marks a unique instance of co-emperorship, though Marcus Aurelius was always the senior partner. When Antoninus Pius dies in 161 CE, Marcus Aurelius ascends to the throne. He is perhaps the quintessential philosopher king, a Stoic philosopher whose personal meditations, known as Meditations, you might even read today, if you were a very literate Roman, that is. He values reason, duty, and self-control above all else. He's a man of deep intellect and serious intent, and under normal circumstances, he might have presided over another golden age. You might feel a sense of calm wisdom emanating from the imperial palace. But the world, alas, is rarely so accommodating. Marcus Aurelius's reign is tragically marked by relentless challenges. The Antonine Plague, possibly smallpox, sweeps through the empire, devastating the population, including the legions. You see the streets of Rome emptier, the fear in people's eyes, the constant processions for the dead. It's a terrifying and uncontrollable force, far more insidious than any barbarian invasion. Then come the barbarian invasions. The Marcomannic Wars rage along the Danube frontier, forcing Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher, to spend years campaigning on the cold, brutal northern borders. Imagine the contradiction. A man who prefers to ponder the nature of existence is forced to lead legions in bloody battles, living in tents, facing down savage tribes. He fights valiantly, but the strain is immense. He even had to sell imperial luxuries to fund the wars, a stark contrast to Nero's profligacy. Despite these immense pressures, Marcus Aurelius remained steadfast, ruling with integrity and a profound sense of duty. He's a tragic figure in many ways, a man of peace forced to be a man of war, a scholar burdened by a dying world. His reign shows that even the good emperors faced disturbing realities, and sometimes, even the best intentions couldn't ward off the inevitable. And then we come to Commodus. Marcus Aurelius, unlike the previous good emperors, breaks the adoptive tradition and names his biological son, Commodus, as his successor. You can almost hear the collective gasp of the Roman elite. It's a return to the hereditary principle, which has, more often than not, ended in disaster for Rome. Historians still argue whether Marcus Aurelius made this decision out of fatherly love, a belief in his son's potential, or simply a desperate hope to secure a peaceful transition in a time of crisis. Commodus takes the throne in 180 CE upon his father's death. He's handsome and physically strong, but entirely lacking in his father's wisdom or virtue. He's the opposite of everything the five good emperors stood for. His reign quickly devolves into a bizarre and disturbing spectacle of self-indulgence and megalomania. He abandons his father's wars and makes peace with the barbarians, often on unfavorable terms, infuriating the military. Commodus is obsessed with gladiatorial combat. Not content to just watch, he actually performs in the arena himself, sometimes dressed as Hercules, fighting against wild beasts or carefully selected gladiators who were too weak or scared to harm him. You find it absolutely shocking, a profound humiliation for the imperial office. An emperor, a godlike figure, fighting in the dirt like a common criminal? It's profoundly disturbing, a sign of utter contempt for tradition and decorum. He even renamed Rome the Colonia Commodiana. It's like your eccentric neighbor who insists on dressing up as a superhero for mundane errands suddenly becomes president of your country. He surrounds himself with corrupt advisors, throws lavish parties, and executes those who displease him. His behavior grows increasingly erratic and paranoid. The atmosphere in Rome becomes one of fear and disgust. The dream of the good emperors, of enlightened rule, shatters under the weight of Commodus's bizarre reign. You almost miss Domitian's predictable authoritarianism compared to Commodus's theatrical madness. Eventually, the madness ends. In 192 CE, Commodus is assassinated, strangled in his bath by a wrestler named Narcissus, after a conspiracy involving his mistress, his chamberlain, and the Praetorian prefect. His death brings an end to the Antonine dynasty and, arguably, the golden age of the Roman Empire. You stand there, amidst the renewed chaos, realizing that the brief period of reason and stability was just that, brief. Rome is about to plunge into another century of unprecedented turmoil. The assassination of Commodus in 192 CE sends shockwaves through Rome, and you, having just endured his bizarre gladiatorial antics, feel a familiar dread creeping back. The Pax Romana, that long stretch of peace and prosperity, is definitively over. Rome plunges into a fresh cycle of civil war, a brutal contest for the imperial throne that will define the next century. This isn't just about who leads, but about whether the empire itself can even hold together. For a brief, chaotic interlude, the Praetorian Guard, once again asserting its power, literally auctions off the emperorship to the highest bidder. A wealthy senator named Didius Gellianus buys the throne, but his reign is ludicrously short and utterly illegitimate in the eyes of the legions stationed across the empire. You probably barely registered his existence before news arrived of three powerful generals, each proclaimed emperor by their troops, marching on Rome. It's the year of the 5 emperors, even more chaotic than the year of 4. The most formidable of these contenders is Septimius Severus, the ambitious and ruthless governor of Pannonia, modern-day Hungary and parts of the Balkans. He's from Leptis Magna in North Africa, a true outsider, and a hardened military man. He knows exactly what Rome needs: strong leadership, an iron fist, and a secure military. You watch as his legions, disciplined and loyal, sweep aside Didius Gellianus with contemptuous ease. Gellianus is executed, and Severus consolidates his power. Severus, proclaimed emperor in 193 CE, immediately disbands the existing Praetorian Guard, who had become a corrupt and dangerous force, and replaces them with his own loyal soldiers. This sends a clear message. The military, and his military, is now the ultimate arbiter of power. He then spends the next few years eliminating his rivals, particularly Pescennius Niger in the east and Clodius Albinus in the west, in a series of brutal civil wars that stretch across the empire. You hear the grim news of Roman fighting Roman in far-off lands, the empire bleeding itself white. Once he's secured his position, Severus establishes the Severan dynasty, 193 to 235 CE, a line of soldier emperors who rule with an almost absolute focus on the military. His famous dying advice to his sons was, "Be harmonious, enrich the soldiers, and scorn all other men." This philosophy shapes his reign. He significantly increases soldiers' pay and benefits, ensuring their loyalty. He even allows soldiers to marry, a revolutionary change. You notice the military's presence is stronger than ever. The legions are now the true power behind the throne. This policy, while securing stability in the short term, places an enormous financial burden on the empire in the long run. Historians still argue whether Severus's militarization of the empire ultimately saved it from immediate collapse or set the stage for its later decline by depleting its resources. Severus is a capable but stern ruler. He's a skilled general, leading successful campaigns against the Parthians and in Britain, where he tries to restore order to Hadrian's Wall. He's also a serious legal reformer, but his justice can be harsh, especially for those perceived as threats. You see his monumental arch erected in the Roman Forum, commemorating his Parthian victories, a stark, powerful reminder of his military might. His wife, Julia Domna, is an incredibly intelligent and influential woman, a Syrian by birth. She becomes a powerful figure in her own right, surrounding herself with philosophers and intellectuals, and effectively acting as co-empress. She sets a precedent for strong imperial women who will play significant roles in later Roman politics. It's a fascinating contrast to the often purely domestic roles of earlier empresses. When Septimius Severus dies in 211 CE in Britain, he leaves the empire to his 2 notoriously quarrelsome sons, Caracalla and Geta. You brace yourself for the inevitable family drama. Caracalla, named for the hooded Gallic cloak he popularized, is ruthless and paranoid, much like some of the worst emperors before him. He quickly murders his brother Geta in their mother's arms, consolidating power entirely for himself. Caracalla's reign, 211 to 217 CE, is short and brutal. He embarks on military campaigns, but is more interested in plunder than strategic gains. His most enduring, and perhaps most cynical, legacy is the Constitutio Antoniniana of 212 CE, which grants Roman citizenship to virtually all free inhabitants of the empire. While this sounds progressive, it was largely a revenue-generating move, as it allowed Caracalla to expand the inheritance tax base. You, if you were a provincial, might suddenly find yourself a Roman citizen, with all its privileges and, crucially, its tax obligations. Caracalla also builds the massive baths of Caracalla in Rome, a truly colossal complex of public baths, gyms, and libraries, testament to the sheer scale of Roman ambition even in troubled times. You might enjoy a visit, but you can't help but notice the dark cloud of his tyranny hanging over it all. He's eventually assassinated by one of his own Praetorian prefects during a campaign in Mesopotamia. The Severan dynasty, born of military might and ruthlessness, ends in a series of chaotic short reigns and further assassinations. You realize that the empire has entered a period of profound instability, where military power is the only true currency, and emperors rise and fall with frightening speed. The stage is now set for the nightmare known as the Crisis of the 3rd Century. The tumultuous Severan dynasty collapses, and you, having just witnessed a family tear itself apart and an empire bleed itself dry, are plunged headfirst into arguably the most disturbing period of Roman history, the Crisis of the 3rd Century. This isn't just a few bad emperors. This is nearly 50 years, from 235 to 284 CE, of almost continuous civil war, economic collapse, and external invasions. Imagine your entire world being constantly upended, never knowing who is in charge from one month to the next. This era sees roughly 26 emperors, depending on how you count them, most of whom meet violent ends. They're often called barracks emperors, generals proclaimed emperor by their legions, only to be overthrown and murdered by those same legions a few months or years later. It's a brutal game of imperial musical chairs, where the music rarely stops and the chairs are often stained with blood. You hear whispers of a new emperor every few weeks, only for news of his assassination to follow swiftly. It's impossible to keep track, and frankly, quite exhausting. Historians still argue whether the primary cause of the 3rd century crisis was internal political instability or the relentless external pressures from barbarian tribes and the Sasanian Empire. Economically, the empire is in freefall. Constant warfare means massive expenditures, but there's no stable tax base. Emperors devalue the currency, minting coins with less and less precious metal. You notice the silver content in your denarius shrinking, making your money worth less and less. Prices skyrocket, trade collapses, and people hoard what little good money they have. It's rampant inflation, a financial nightmare that destroys savings and livelihoods. Imagine trying to run a business when the value of your currency changes every other day. And as if internal strife and economic ruin weren't enough, the empire is under relentless attack from all sides. In the west, barbarian tribes like the Goths, Alemanni, and Franks smash through the weakened frontiers, raiding deep into Roman territory. Cities are sacked, populations flee, and the feeling of security, a hallmark of the Pax Romana, evaporates. You might hear stories of towns you once knew, now burned to the ground, their inhabitants enslaved or massacred. It's a chilling new reality. In the east, a new and aggressive Persian empire, the Sassanids, emerges as a formidable foe, constantly threatening Roman provinces in the Near East. They even capture a Roman emperor, Valerian, in 260 CE, a humiliation almost beyond belief. Imagine the emperor, the divine representative on earth, paraded as a captive by a foreign power. It's a propaganda coup for the Persians and a devastating blow to Roman prestige. Legend even says Valerian was used as a living footstool by the Sasanian king, Shapur I, before being flayed and stuffed. While likely exaggerated, the story itself speaks volumes about the depth of Roman despair. The empire actually splinters during this period. The western provinces, tired of waiting for help from Rome, form the Gallic Empire, encompassing Gaul, Britain, and Spain, with their own emperors. In the east, the wealthy city of Palmyra, under its formidable queen Zenobia, establishes the Palmyrene Empire, controlling vital trade routes and even challenging Roman authority in Egypt. You find yourself living in an empire that is literally tearing itself apart, its pieces flying off in different directions. It's a terrifying thought. Is this the end of Rome? During this chaotic period, the Roman army transforms. Soldiers are no longer primarily Roman citizens. Many are barbarians recruited into the legions, often fiercely loyal to their commanders rather than to Rome itself. Military service becomes the only real path to power and wealth, but also to almost certain death. You see the legions become less about defense and more about making and unmaking emperors. Life for you, the ordinary Roman, is incredibly hard. Fear, famine, and plague are constant companions. Roads are unsafe due to bandits and invading tribes. Trade routes are disrupted. Public services collapse. You live in walled cities, constantly on guard, hoping the latest emperor general can somehow stem the tide of disaster. It's like living in a permanent state of emergency, with no end in sight. Yet, despite the immense challenges, the empire somehow manages to cling on. The sheer resilience of Roman institutions, the vastness of its territory, and the ingrained sense of its own destiny prevent total collapse. There are moments of brief respite, when a competent general manages to win a few battles and bring a fleeting moment of order, only for the cycle of assassination and civil war to resume. You might find yourself clinging to small moments of joy, a shared meal, a quiet evening, knowing that tomorrow could bring a new emperor, a new battle, or a new tax. The crisis of the 3rd century is a disturbing testament to how quickly a seemingly invincible empire can descend into anarchy when its fundamental structures are compromised. The empire is a patient on the verge of expiring, but a powerful doctor is about to arrive. After decades of relentless chaos, the empire is gasping for air. You, a survivor of the crisis of the 3rd century, are utterly exhausted by the constant parade of short-lived emperors, the economic ruin, and the never-ending threat of barbarian incursions. Just when you think Rome can't possibly endure another day of this madness, a new figure emerges from the ranks of the military, a general with an iron will and a revolutionary vision, Diocletian. Diocletian, a man of humble Dalmatian origins, takes the throne in 284 CE. He's not a dashing orator or a charismatic leader. He's a stern, pragmatic soldier who recognizes that the old ways of governing Rome are no longer sufficient. He understands that the empire is simply too vast and too complex for one man to rule effectively, especially when that one man is constantly battling usurpers. His solution is radical, unprecedented, and, for you, a Roman citizen, a stark departure from everything you've known. He institutes the Tetrarchy, meaning rule by 4. The empire is divided into 2 halves, east and west, each ruled by an Augustus, senior emperor. Each Augustus then appoints a Caesar, junior emperor, and designated successor. This creates a system of 4 co-rulers, each with their own capital and sphere of influence. Imagine 4 CEOs, each with their own regional headquarters, all supposedly working together. The idea is to ensure better defense against external threats and a smoother, more peaceful succession. Historians still argue whether the Tetrarchy was an ingenious solution to the empire's immediate problems, or if it sowed the seeds for the eventual permanent division of the Roman Empire. Diocletian takes the eastern Augustus position for himself, ruling from Nicomedia in modern-day Turkey, while his old comrade, Maximian, becomes the western Augustus, ruling from Milan, not Rome, which is a symbolic blow to the old capital. The Caesars are Constantius Chlorus and Galerius. You see the imperial court move away from Rome, further diminishing the city's central importance, even though it remains the spiritual heart of the empire. This administrative overhaul is just the beginning. Diocletian transforms the very nature of the emperorship. He adopts a more autocratic, almost Eastern, style of rule, known as the Dominate, from Dominus, Lord. You no longer casually approach the emperor. He rarely appears in public, and when he does, it's in magnificent robes, adorned with jewels, demanding prostration from those who approach him. There's a new formality, a chilling distance between the ruler and the ruled. It's a clear message. He is not just the first citizen. He is a divine monarch, chosen by the gods. He even wore a diadem, a jeweled headband, a distinctly non-Roman symbol that screamed king. To combat the rampant inflation that has crippled the economy, Diocletian attempts to impose price controls with his edict on maximum prices. This edict tries to fix the prices of thousands of goods and services. You, as a merchant or craftsman, find this incredibly difficult to enforce, and it often leads to shortages as people refuse to sell at unprofitable prices. It's a grand economic experiment that ultimately fails, but it shows the emperor's desperate attempts to stabilize the collapsing economy. He also reforms the tax system, making it more regular and efficient, though also more burdensome. Diocletian also undertakes a massive reform of the military, increasing the size of the army and reorganizing it for better defense. He builds new fortifications and strengthens the frontiers. You see more soldiers, more garrisons, a constant readiness for war. While necessary for defense, this further militarization of society strains resources and integrates more barbarian elements into the Roman way of life. One of the most disturbing aspects of Diocletian's reign is his great persecution of Christians, beginning in 303 CE. Believing that the empire's troubles were due to the god's anger over the rise of Christianity, he launched the most widespread and systematic persecution in Roman history. Churches are destroyed, scriptures are burned, and Christians are stripped of their rights, tortured, and executed for refusing to sacrifice to the Roman gods. You witness terrifying scenes of arrests and executions, a grim reminder of the state's absolute power over belief. Historians still argue whether Diocletian's persecution was primarily driven by religious conviction or by a political desire to unify the empire under traditional Roman values during a time of crisis. Despite his authoritarianism and harsh policies, Diocletian manages to pull the empire back from the brink of collapse. He brings stability, albeit at a great cost to individual liberties. In a truly unprecedented move, in 305 CE, Diocletian voluntarily abdicates, forcing Maximian to do the same. He retires to his magnificent palace in Split, modern-day Croatia, to grow cabbages. It's an act of remarkable self-restraint, an attempt to prove that his system of peaceful transition could work. But as you watch the new Caesars, Constantius Chlorus and Galerius, step up, you can't help but wonder if this forced retirement will truly prevent another bout of civil war. Diocletian's grand experiment, the Tetrarchy, aimed to bring stability and peaceful succession to an empire that had been tearing itself apart. You, having witnessed his unprecedented abdication, might feel a cautious optimism, hoping his carefully crafted system will finally end the cycle of violence. But alas, human ambition is a stubborn thing, and the best-laid plans of emperors often go awry. No sooner does Diocletian retire to his cabbage patch than the Tetrarchy begins to unravel. The system was designed for two Augusti to pass power to their Caesars, but the death of Constantius Chlorus in Britain in 306 CE immediately throws a wrench into the works. His troops, bypassing the established line of succession, proclaim his son, Constantine, as Augustus. This sets off another brutal round of civil wars, a desperate struggle for supremacy among various contenders. It's a bitter irony that the system designed to prevent civil war almost immediately triggered another one. You might just shake your head, thinking, here we go again. Constantine, however, is no ordinary barracks emperor. He is cunning, ambitious, and a brilliant military strategist. He systematically eliminates his rivals, one by one. You hear tales of his decisive victories, culminating in the pivotal Battle of the Milvian Bridge outside Rome in 312 CE, where he defeats Maxentius, his rival, in the west. This battle is legendary, not just for its military outcome, but for a profound event that, according to tradition, occurred before it. Constantine claims to have seen a vision in the sky, a cross of light, or perhaps the Chi-Rho symbol, representing the first two letters of Christ's name in Greek, with the words "In hoc signo vinces," in this sign you will conquer. He orders his soldiers to paint this symbol on their shields. Whether it was a genuine divine revelation, a clever political maneuver, or a desperate hope in a time of crisis, this moment marks a turning point for the Roman Empire and for the fledgling Christian faith. Historians still argue whether Constantine's conversion was a sincere spiritual awakening or a shrewd political calculation to harness the growing power of the Christian community. With his victory at the Milvian Bridge, Constantine becomes the sole ruler of the Western Roman Empire. He then issues the Edict of Milan in 313 CE, alongside his remaining Eastern co-emperor, Licinius. This isn't an endorsement of Christianity as the official religion, but it grants religious toleration throughout the empire, ending the state-sponsored persecutions that you, and many others, had witnessed under Diocletian. You might feel a profound sense of relief, or perhaps bewilderment, at this sudden shift in imperial policy. Christians, who had been hiding in catacombs, can now worship openly. It's a seismic change in the religious landscape. Constantine eventually defeats Licinius in 324 CE, becoming the sole emperor of a reunited Roman Empire. For the first time in decades, a single hand guides the destiny of Rome. He continues to favor Christianity, pouring imperial resources into building churches and granting privileges to Christian clergy. The faith that was once persecuted is now embraced by the most powerful man in the world. You see the traditional Roman gods being slowly, steadily nudged aside. One of Constantine's most significant and lasting legacies is the founding of a new capital city. Recognizing the strategic importance of the East, and perhaps wanting to distance himself from Rome's pagan past and senatorial intrigues, he establishes a magnificent new city on the site of ancient Byzantium, dedicating it as Constantinople in 330 CE. You hear the grandeur of the new capital, often called New Rome, a rival in splendor to the old city, strategically located at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. This move further shifts the empire's center of gravity eastward. It's like the president moving the capital to a brand new city built just for the purpose. Constantine's reign, 306 to 337 CE, brings a much-needed period of strong, centralized rule after the chaos of the Tetrarchy's collapse. He reestablishes order, reforms the currency, though still with some debasement, and strengthens the empire's borders. He's a towering figure, rightly called the Great, whose policies profoundly reshaped the Roman world. He even called the First Council of Nicaea, playing a crucial role in establishing Orthodox Christian doctrine. When Constantine dies in 337 CE, he attempts to pass the empire on to his sons, but this, predictably, leads to more power struggles and civil wars among them. While he achieved remarkable feats, he couldn't quite escape the curse of dynastic succession. You, the Roman citizen, are left with a strong, Christianized empire, but one that is increasingly divided, both geographically and spiritually, between its Latin West and its Greek East. The question now isn't if the empire will fall, but which half will fall first. Constantine's reign brings a temporary reprieve, a powerful stabilization for the Roman Empire, but the seeds of its eventual decline, especially in the West, are firmly planted. You, watching the empire increasingly pivot towards its new capital in the East, Constantinople, begin to sense a deepening fracture. The once unified Roman world is slowly, subtly, drifting apart. After Constantine, the empire is frequently divided and reunited, but the trend is clear. Two distinct halves are emerging. The Western Roman Empire, with its Latin language, its traditional capital of Rome, though no longer the administrative center, and its focus on older traditions, is becoming increasingly vulnerable. The Eastern Roman Empire, often called Byzantium by later historians, with its Greek language, its wealthy cities, and its strategic location, is proving far more resilient. You notice the cultural and political divergence, a growing sense that you are either Eastern or Western Roman. The primary cause of the West's weakening is relentless external pressure from barbarian tribes. These aren't just isolated raids. These are massive migrations of peoples, Goths, Vandals, Huns, Franks, and others, pushed from their homelands by other tribes or simply seeking better lands and opportunities within the Roman borders. The Roman army, once the invincible protector, is stretched thin, increasingly reliant on barbarian federates, allies, within its own ranks. You hear constant reports of the borders being breached, of once safe provinces being overrun, of cities being sacked. It's like a slow, agonizing siege, but across an entire continent. The most famous, and perhaps most shocking, event is the sack of Rome by the Visigoths under Alaric in 410 CE. Imagine the unthinkable, the eternal city, which had not been successfully invaded for 8 centuries, falls. While the sack itself isn't as destructive as later events, the psychological impact is immense. It shatters the myth of Rome's invincibility. You feel a profound sense of despair and dread. If Rome itself can fall, what hope is there for the rest of the West? This event deeply disturbed many Romans, leading some to question their traditional gods and even Christianity's ability to protect the empire. Economically, the West is in decline. Trade routes are disrupted by invasions, cities shrink, and rural life becomes increasingly precarious. The tax base dwindles, making it harder to fund the army, which in turn makes it harder to repel invaders, creating a vicious cycle of decline. You see the once bustling markets becoming quieter, the roads emptier, a sense of decay settling over the landscape. It's a slow bleed, not a sudden collapse. Politically, the Western emperors become increasingly powerless figureheads. often controlled by powerful barbarian generals within their own armies. The real power shifts from the imperial court to the military strongmen, many of whom are of barbarian origin themselves. You see emperors rise and fall, often at the whim of these generals, much like the barracks emperors of the 3rd century crisis, but with an added layer of foreign influence. Historians still argue whether the decline of the Western Roman Empire was primarily due to military failures, economic collapse, or internal social and political decay. Education declines, infrastructure crumbles, and the Roman way of life, with its public baths and theaters, slowly fades in many areas. The vast villa estates become more self-sufficient, acting as small, isolated kingdoms. The legal and administrative structures of Rome gradually give way to more localized, less centralized forms of governance. You see the vast bureaucracy of earlier emperors slowly dissolve, replaced by a patchwork of smaller authorities. Finally, in 476 CE, the traditional date for the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the last Western Roman emperor, a young boy named Romulus Augustulus, a name that ironically echoes Rome's mythical founder and its first emperor, is deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer. Odoacer doesn't crown himself emperor. Instead, he sends the imperial regalia back to the Eastern emperor in Constantinople, signaling that he accepts the East's supremacy but will rule Italy himself. You might not even notice the change immediately. Life continues much as it had before, under barbarian rule. There's no grand, dramatic explosion, no final battle for Rome. It's more like a flickering candle finally going out. The Eastern Roman Empire, meanwhile, continues to thrive for another 1,000 years, preserving Roman law, culture, and Greek learning, before finally falling to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. But for the West, the empire as you knew it, with its centralized authority and its unified cultural identity, has ceased to exist. You are left in a fragmented landscape, a collection of barbarian kingdoms rising from the ashes of what was once the mighty Roman Empire. The disturbing life of the emperors, with its cycles of power, paranoia, and violence, has finally run its course in the West, leaving behind a legacy of both incredible achievement and profound, sometimes terrifying, human folly.